Hey, hope you're well. Should you open a little bit just by asking anyone who wants to share anything to take this moment? How are you feeling? How are you doing? In your space. So I see there's people who are rejoining coming from the last call into this one. I think that's good too. I think this is gonna be a little bit different from the last one. And it's gonna be simpler, but it's also gonna be more. Yeah, just okay, so I think we should start. We should just start. Um, and then just let those who are still to come to just slowly land. Okay, so I hope you're well. Welcome to June for those who are joining us landing for the first time. For me, it's quite a big this is a big month, this time of the intensive. I would say this is when we're actually really starting. We're unpacking and unloading quite a lot this week, and I promise that it's not going to be as dense as it might look like. But thank you for the feedbacks for those who are enjoying. For some who might find this quite science-based, this is really important in a way that a lot of what we will be sharing in terms of how to hold space, a lot of it will be coming from these necessary understandings. Um, so the way I learn, just to give some of you some tips on like I conduct trainings and I like to learn because I am teaching, and sometimes the best way to teach is to learn. The best way to learn is to teach. So this is why I do teach. If I would still embody the word teacher, it's also to embody the word like learner. And I'm really passionate about learning. Um, I I'm really interested in many things. And so when you are maybe listening to certain things I'm sharing, I'd like you to imagine or understand that um, when I learn certain things, I either use the sound as a learning device or I use the image. So often I would just listen. I would listen. I would have these lectures in my ear. Sometimes I've listened to it 30 times, 50 times, might even be 100 times, over and over and over again. And by the time I'm teaching it, it's become a part of me. Maybe twice, thrice for some things, they start to come together. So when I record these calls, the way they're designed is the same. They're not going to make sense in a one go. So right now we're taking this year. I don't know if we're going to repeat this kind of year next year and the year after that. So right now we are um, giving it this year to really elaborate, to make clear, to answer in a really comprehensive and long way, not simple answers, not the answers that would take like a minute. There are ways to give 1 minute answers or 2 minute answers, but some of you are deserving. Okay, I'd like the long answer because I'm big. I am long. I'm really deep. So I'm going to invest. I'm going to take my time to look at this. So in this journey we're having, we're probably all asking the same questions, but we're held by something common, which is what does the inner dance have to say about what we are? Um, so starting from my journey 18, 19, 20 years ago, living alone on the island, yeah, I was asking these questions like, what am I doing here? What's the point? How long have I been here? And um, just to establish some themes, the answer that I got that I'm still sharing today that belongs to the experience is that we're old. It's like we're really old. We're super old. We're ancient. And I had these memories come up that came from where it all began. Everything was space and everything was just so cosmic. And I remember Earth. So slowly, as I came back to the world, something was happening to my energy, my body, my mind, where I was somehow constantly remembering like how did we design all of this? Like there's a stage in the journey where you actually cancel it out. Like nothing, none of it matters, none of it exists. I invalidated. There's no earth, there's no world. Yesterday didn't happen. That's that was where I came from. And when I left that, it was quite the opposite. It's like I validate where I am now. Like one way to maybe understand this is when you wonder about the concept of death. Like when you die, there's this human definition of death where we think that when we die, it stops. Okay, that was it. That was my story. It's like 50 years, 60 years, 70 years. Maybe you get to 100 years and that's it. I'm done. I'm going to leave my name, my vibration, my body, and I'm gonna become someone else, something else. I'm gonna become like a bird, an ant. I'm gonna become like Bob, Joe, Henry, Lisa. That's not how I experienced it. When I lived out my deaths multiple times, that's not how I experienced it. I have a different understanding of death. And that's something I work with when I, let's say, learn. When I do my work, when I live my life, I it's coming from this understanding that when we die, it doesn't stop. This might be a little bit hard to take in, but you won't go away. It's like you would really just become aware that there are so many versions of you living all of these versions all at the same time. So let's say if you play with the idea that right now you're actually dead already, and then there's a place out there where you haven't been born, and somehow they're all happening at the same time. So you're still a small boy or small girl, and you're an old man and an old woman, and that's all happening in a place where time doesn't look the same. And when you die, if there was such a thing as death, you just keep going back. There's like a loop where you're going there. You're going to a multi-dimensional place where everything's going on all at the same time. Now, dimensionally, you can keep going deeper and deeper and deeper in that, where uh, all of these parallel realities start to coexist and overlap and melt into all the other realities that's called like someone else, other people, other days, other lives. Somehow they're all like wrapped together, they're all connected together. So one of the gifts that we're going to be given eventually by the earth, by the universe, the mother, and you can receive this either while you're alive or when you die. It doesn't actually make a difference at that point, it's immortality. It's when you talk about like oldness, it doesn't just talk about like ancestors and whatnot. It talks about a holographic universe where um you can't escape this space. So the experience many people call inner dance and other things now. This is a glimpse of what it actually looks like. So in a way, we are dying, and when we go there where there is no death, where there are these multiple realities, these simultaneous like moments happening at the same time, we're just learning to hold it, to hold ourselves there, like more and more and more. Now, one of the reasons why I'm talking about this is it could help you when you begin your study process to understand this this state of immortality, of actually being here, that there's a part of you that will live forever. And when you are wanting to live someone else or something else, you can instantly go there. But within the hologram that is called you, there's something very infinite and eternal there that everyone is beginning to navigate. And the because of the timelessness and the infinite amount of resource, and it's up to you. Like when you die, you would live every atom, every molecule, every quark, every organ, everything just starts to become known or knowable. You could really take your time. I mean, for me, that was really the gift that was given, and this is something I'm offering to others. Like when I hold a space, this is what I'm offering. It's this notion that if you were given by the mother, by the earth, like like years, decades, centuries, like millennia of being here for a really long time, like what would you end up with? What would you look like? What would you be doing? So I think that's what happened to me. Like I lived for so long alone, and that aloneness wasn't 2 years because I experienced energy. Then something happened to time where it really, really stretched out. And by the time I began to do this inner dance work, um, I was seeing the same thing happening to other people. I entered into a deeper time construct, which felt like like a loop. Like, okay, I've lived that day before, like so many times, and I'm now living that day. And then when I go into another day, I've been here before, I've done that. How many times have I done that? There's a part of you when you start to enter that depth of dimensionality, there's something that stops because, if I've done everything already and I know that there's something that stops that's motivation based, like goal directed. And so when I talk about studying, that becomes a next thing that for me, it's more than a passion, like because I have been here on the earth for a long time. I'm turning 48, I think next month. But I'm not that age. I have a way of being here on earth that's not that age. When I've been here for a long time and I share the same memories of the whole thing, the whole earth, the whole species, then what informs me more isn't so much just what is practical for a person. There's something quite alive in me that's the planet that's understanding itself. Um, and the person is the planet. There isn't really a separation. The person is the planet in a way that we mirror the planet. Like, for example, when you think about the body, then, when you think about the brain, the nervous system, the body, think about all the organs in the body. You might think that these are names, brain regions or whatnot, but they're not really just organs. They're not nuclei in certain brain parts, they're not just the endocrine system. They may have names given to them, but what they are systems that mirror the earth. They're documents. They are they're microcosms of the macro. Okay, they're holographic parts of the whole. And when you learn about these, which we would look at little by little, more and more, deeper and deeper, there's something there regards, like, we designed it, like this is what got us here. And upon looking at it comes the transformation. We can actually change the body, and a part of that change comes about through the understanding of what did we store, what did we, like, contain. The better word is, what are we embodying right now? So the person is important. You're hugely valuable. You're important. You validate yourself. You love yourself. You get to know yourself. But the person is becoming super fast, like planetary. The beginning as an experience, and later as a wisdom. Something in you is coming alive that's old. And when you validate the planet, that you are the planet, your body is a planet in many ways. Like, all the systems in your body are planetary because it has been here a long time. It had learned to be here a long time. When you validate time, when you come back to time, if you come from space, come back to time, keep doing that. Go to space, go back to time, go to space, go back to time. When we think about time then as a central core construct in inner dance, that alone is like an interesting principle. Like, how are you holding time, like, in the body, structurally? Because when you perform inner dance on another being, for others, what you're giving is time. You're shifting time. You're changing time. You're manipulating time. Sometimes you can take it away. Sometimes you can give more. You either speed things up or you slow things down. And you can call it whatever word that you want, but this is what you're doing. Somehow time is embedded in the body. And time is one of the most beautiful questions in philosophy, in spirit. It's like, what is time? So but the body holds time. It does hold time, and it takes very, very small um doings to shift what in science is called time perception. Okay, all kinds of time scales are coexisting in here and out there, and it's always really up to you how you would like to perceive it. And your perception would lead to the experience of it. And, it could happen now, it could happen tomorrow, it could happen, while you're walking down the street. It could happen from inside your own entrainment, or it could be someone gave you something, and you ingested that. Maybe you heard something, like a sound, and then it brought you there, which is our common experience. Maybe you lay down for whatever reason, and then it happened. Time shifted. So the experience is quite easy. You don't need a training to experience that, and to also, facilitate that. That had always been for me the easy part. The hard part, which is for me the interesting part, is how is that structure actually, like, embodied. I don't really, I'm not interested in what do we do. For me, the doing happens automatically. I'm more interested in, okay, what is there? What is here? So, okay, we're going to be opening some of the books, some of the chapters, some of the pages today to look at these interesting questions. We'll stick to that. So by the end of this Zoom call, or by the end of my sharing anyway, we would have some answers that we could go over. They're my formulations. You can help to reformulate, unformulate. It's up to you, like what you want to do with this. But what is time to you? So my offering for you is because I've been doing this for so long, for almost 2 decades. I will give my notes. I will open my notebooks as to how are we manipulating time in the human body in what is now called the inner dance Kundalini awakening, something workshop session journey. Um, One thing we have to admit is we are being given a lot of power. There's so much power in the work, and that power can alter people's lives. So if you wanted to understand like how to wield that power, so that power is also a wisdom, that power is also, like how do you wield time effectively? Because if you do it like a little bit too much, it's gonna do certain things. Like there is such a thing as too much. There is such a thing as too little. And there is such a thing as just right. So there's something in the body that balances. Like you're looking for the Goldilocks, maybe the Goldilocks clock. Like what is enough time? Okay, so let's go to my digital brain now. Um, I am sharing, yes. Okay, so what I normally do is I have a bunch of notes. I have two digital notebooks. One's the iPad, and then I have a remarkable tablet where I have my notes. And then I'm sometimes looking at it just to guide me. Um, oops. Hmm, wait, I'm trying to make the pen thick. I think just making it closer. It would be interesting if the body actually looked like this, like a grid or a matrix. But for me, there is some truth to it that this is what the mind and the body looks like. And we could keep um drawing this out like something called space and something called time. This is who we are. This is what we look like. Um, and it's necessary maybe to simplify it in the beginning in this way. There are many things that you can do with this, and I think one simple way to look at it is we're a vibration, we're a wave, and there are different vibrations, right? There's different types of um, energies. So let's stick with two. The body has to deal with all these energies, what you might call waves. Um, there could be so many words. You can use waves. You can use like rhythms. Your body somehow is built on rhythms. We're trying to centralize some of those rhythms, but there's complexity there where there's not just one rhythm. When someone asks you, "What's your rhythm?" You probably just scratch your head. Well, I don't know. Like, um, do I want to be boxed into one rhythm? So your body probably has, like many rhythms, and there's probably like a master rhythm that tries to organize all those other rhythms. I could say cycles, right? So let's say going back to this, starting with the word maybe wave, just that one, the wave. Mm-hmm. Web. Wave. No, not B. What is a wave? What if you were a wave? What if you have an incarnation where you started as a wave? Like, what would you look like? What would you be made of? Now, because we are going closer into music, week by week, day by day, and we're starting to understand that the brain is made of music. It's not just music as you might hear in Spotify or in the radio or MTV. The brain is music. If music was a metaphor and music was a structure. Now, when you look at this, what did you see? Okay, so thinking about space and time, when you start out with let's say space is the vertical, right? Space is the vertical. It's this line. So when you look at like the height, the high and the low, this is what you might call, like normally you might call that like volume as a wave, if this is sound. Even in non-sound, you can still use the word volume. It's like the amount. It's like how much is there. If you were to think about it as sound, technically you would call it amplitude. And this is something used to explain brain waves. So you might say that the amplitude of, let's say, this red line is like greater or higher. And then when you think about time, let's come up with another color. Let's say blue. So, come up with like a tinier wave. Okay, so you might say this is lower in amplitude, but where it's high is there's a lot more frequency. So when you hear the word frequency, which a lot of people would speak a lot, frequency would be a measurement of how many oscillations or repetitions, how many cycles are happening within any single point in time. So let's say if this was maybe the span of, let's say, an hour, you're doing like a 60-minute journey. Like, what's the frequency that you hold? And then at what point are you holding like lower or higher amplitude? So this could be seen simply as like, this is my inner dance. So sometimes I have like a greater amplitude, less frequency, and then I would add more frequencies. And then again, this is what your session could look like. Yet this is also what the body does naturally, with or without the inner dance, with or without the journeys. This is what your body does somehow. So there's some beauty there where it sounds complex, but it also sounds quite easy when you simplify it in these terms, that this is what we are doing. We are somehow like in time. Something we're doing in time is we're organizing all of that which exists in space. Okay, like there's so many things coexisting in space. Don't disappear. And then in time, you can sequence all of this information one at a time. So in the last week that we were holding space, when we talked about the hippocampus, for example, and we brought up the theta wave, we were, remember, like discussing like the concept of memory. When we brought up the hippocampus, we were talking about memory, and we were studying certain parts of the brain that coordinates with the hippocampus that actually uses a wave to help the brain, mind, body to organize information. Let's say what you had accumulated throughout the day is now organizing itself at night during non-REM 2 or 3 or slow wave sleep or REM state. So here's where energy meets brain states meets music, like in a way. So because there are certain musics that can enact the theta wave. So we're going to be reviewing certain things that we've taken up for the last two waves that we've had, where we spoke about like the two calls in May. We will tie them up this week, especially today. That maybe didn't come as clear during the last call. So you're somehow organizing an earth, and a word that probably would resonate a lot more is you're synchronizing. Okay, so if there are like so many different waves and frequencies, and um eventually, like in time, it becomes like singular, and these singular waves are hiding like lots of frequencies, but you would be able to slow certain things down. Okay, so this is what we're talking about, what we will be talking about. It's all about like time. And you can stay with that. When you do hold space, you can talk about time. I regard time to be central. For me, what are people actually looking for? You know, what are they searching for? What are they yearning for? I feel that um, the great trauma that's embedded in children is just a simple statement like, you need to hurry up, you know. So even when people are studying, there's some anxiety there sometimes where, okay, I don't have enough time. You know, I'm busy and, you know, I'm gonna die one day. But if you weren't gonna die, if you're gonna live forever, then the statement that you want to speak to yourself that would also bring healing to others is, there's enough time, because you are immortal, you're infinite, and you are forever. So you take on these tools, okay? Like music can alter time. Literally, like that's becoming a new study in science. Music can alter time perception and time experience. Something about body position, just proprioception. You know, in my work, what I use are words. I speak to bodies. I ask questions like, how old are you? How long have you been here? And what is time? That has been a really powerful tool for opening up the body as space, because space is time. Time is space, you know, in the midst of these polarizations. Okay. When we study music today, I would bring up like a really cool statement by Igor Stravinsky, the composer. And he stated that one of the most important aspects of music is to communicate time. So in a way, there's something in time, in music, that is very specific to communicating time. Like rhythm organizes time, you know, like it's so obvious when you hear it, but there's something historical there, so that when we started to centralize into certain tempos, pulse rates, um, like the rhythm in music, as music evolved, okay, now we standardized rhythm. It took a really long time to get to that, and now we're sharing the same rhythms around the world. There's like a scale of rhythm that's perceivable in the body. The brain recognizes that rhythm, that if you transcend that rhythm, if it goes faster or slower than the scale, it's not music anymore, it's not rhythmic anymore. It's because it's not there anymore. The frequencies are too much for you to recognize, or there's not enough frequencies within the duration that you're used to. And that means that you've entered into another dimension already. It means you've entered another dimension. So when people use music, they are tapping into certain dimensions, and we will be learning ways to conduct certain rhythms that can speed up dimension beyond what people are used to. We can even we can also slow down, and we would be looking at constructs in science that support this, because there are certain parts of the brain that like are sensitive to rhythm, the scale of rhythm, and maybe you're interested in that, just as I'm interested in that. Okay, so let's start. I'm trying to channel like what's the starting point. All right. So we're gonna be bringing up like a brain region today. This is a brain. Um, Specifically, we're gonna be looking at, for me, the most important, most powerful brain region in the inner dance, which would mean it's probably the most important in everyday life. Sleep or awake could be seen to be shaped a little bit like this. Okay, so let's name it. It's called the hypothalamus. So when you do go to a training in Maya, this is what we would talk about. Okay, we don't just talk energy and whatnot, this and that. We would end with the hypothalamus normally. Like we would take this up in some of the last days. So we're taking it up early, and I want to talk about why are we talking about the hypothalamus. Now, if you remember the first week of our second wave, we brought up certain interesting elements that we are tapping into that's undergoing transformations, like one of which is the autonomic nervous system. Let's talk about that today. Okay, the part of your body, the nervous system, the part of your nervous system that knows what to do without you having to tell it that, okay, you're gonna breathe a certain way, your heart's gonna beat a certain way, you're gonna digest now, and you're gonna go to dream state, you're gonna sleep now, you're going to raise your temperature levels, you're gonna release more oxytocin, more cortisol, so on and so forth. So the hypothalamus has a function of regulating the autonomic nervous system. It's the master regulator for that. And the hypothalamus is also part of the limbic system. Particularly, it receives inputs from the limbic system. As you well know, the limbic system is in charge of emotions. So were you to, learn more about emotions, because you're going to be triggering emotions in people. If you would like a systematicity of working with emotions, you would like to learn about the limbic system. Uh, Limbic system is also about memory, could be learning. Okay, there are certain interesting aspects about the limbic system, but most especially emotions. And then maybe in parallel with the autonomic nervous system, we would learn about the endocrine system. Okay, it's parallel to the autonomic nervous system in a way that there are chemistries, there are signaling mechanisms in the body that coordinate these complex, let's say, still say systems, mini systems, and then there are these master systems to coordinate those. So the endocrine system coordinates the long-lasting changes that are sustained. The autonomic nervous system, they like to coordinate the short-term, fast-acting changes. Okay, short, fast, and many people who base their journeys on the autonomic nervous system or the nervous system, you can conduct change, but people will want to keep coming back because they're not actually changing that long. They keep coming back because the change didn't last long enough, so they need to come back next week. They need to come back next week. If you are really open to transforming people, the endocrine system would be your thing as well. That okay, like that change is lasting long, but um, the the action is very slow. Slow acting, but long lasting. Okay, so we've taken this up before. You know this. So the hypothalamus conducts all of these. Like one small brain part actually conducts all of these. And I would love to study this in the long term because the hypothalamus is very, very sensitive to the music that you play to bodies. It's very sensitive to words that it hears, to foods that you eat, because it's coordinating. It's like a hub, and you affect it. You affect many, 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 many things. So over the course of the weeks, the months, we're going to be studying a lot of these we're gonna keep coming back into the autonomic, the limbic, and the endocrine. And sometimes we can study one at a time, and sometimes we can study two at a time. Sometimes we can study all together. And I hope that's interesting for you. Okay. So where do we go from here? Okay, let's let me open up the website for now just to guide you. Okay. Like for those who don't know the password, just ask us. So I worked a little bit on it today. The autonomic nervous system is going to be found very much in the red. Okay, it's always been in the red. So were you to try to study, let's say you wanted to talk about it, you wanted to understand it or talk about it in your group, you can just do your review here. We'll just keep improving on this. Hi, Tom. And really, like, these are just placeholders. There's so much out there. We talked about the dopamine pathways. I want to bring it up today along with other elements. And I'm sure a lot of you are interested in that. So this is just open for one reason. We're going to be specifically going into the nigrostriatal dopamine pathway. Why is that? It's because this is a communication device found in the brainstem that would speak directly to the part of the body that does hold time. This is the basal ganglia. There are time cells in the brain, actual time cells in the brain. They're pacemakers in the heart, right? The SA node. I'm not going to go so much into that today because we already went into that in the last call. But the basal ganglia is a brain part that is very sensitive to dopamine. And we've talked about dopamine. It's the pleasure drug or the anticipation of pleasure. It's the expectation drug. It's the wanting drug. So when it does communicate to the basal ganglia, the dopamine neurons are sent out to the basal ganglia, and when that enters some of the interesting structures in the basal ganglia, most specifically the striatum, you can either slow down or quicken the clockwork in the body. And so this is what we're doing with the music and with touch and with the words and with the body position and anything else that's in your toolbox or toolkit. So we can generalize it. Okay, we're changing time. It's not as simple though, because there would be moments when you actually experience slowness when you make the music faster. Dopamine is kind of funny in that way. So we'll go into that, not just today. We'll go into that more and more, so that you. Right now, I'm just sharing this so that when we bring up something like the substantia nigra, which is where dopamine is sent out in the nigrostriatal pathway as it enters basal ganglia, you know what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about it because this is the time mechanism in the brain. Okay. And already we probably spoken enough about the changes in the music, right? The quick changes, the abrupt changes from fast to slow, slow to fast. That is one of the main tools to allow the substantia nigra to activate itself and send lots of dopamine into the basal ganglia, and that actually starts to explain why the body moves the way it does, why the emotions explode, why visions appear. Okay, so there are answers there. The other color that I worked on today, when I say work, it means matching the notes that I'm constructing in the intensive with the notes that would be here, so that where you to need teaching materials or research materials, you don't have to look outside of inner dance, that we're inner dancing a lot of these different areas more and more. So when you look at them, You don't have to research outside that. These would be more specific to what you would be looking for. This is the basal ganglia once more. Cingulate cortex. I think today I'd like to talk about the septal area once again. You remember the septal area is what sends out theta waves, generates theta waves, and sends that out to the hippocampus, particularly when when you're focused, when you're learning, but also when you're going to sleep, the medial septum specifically would send out the theta rhythm in the hippocampus. There are other aspects about the septal area that would be interesting to look at. And then if I was to add something to the limbic system mix, it would be this really beautiful terminology, the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, the BNST. Why is this important? It's because it's called the extended amygdala. Now, the amygdala is the super sensitive part of your brain that processes emotions, like all these emotions. Also, aggression is a part of it. You see that, it's like, okay, yeah, yikes. You would trigger the amygdala, but there are other parts of the brain that extends fear, one of which is the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis. We'll talk about these slowly. Don't get scared of these terminologies. They're actually quite cool. Over time, just keep repeating it to yourself. Okay, this is the extended amygdala. This is where different types of fear are located here. This is more to do with anxiety. This is more to do with immediate fear, immediate danger. So, okay, let's go back to the screen and let's just check if if you see it. I'm going to be drawing again. Let's go back to the hypothalamus now that we're giving a basic introduction, just to help you to understand. Okay, I'm going to study everything about the body that has to do with electricity, chemistry, circuitries. But because there's this one brain part that actually manages all those, what if I didn't need to learn everything? What if I just, were to study the one thing that manages like all those other ones? Then wouldn't that be neat, right? Wouldn't that be amazing? So the hypothalamus has many regions. A region is called a nucleus. Okay, what is a nucleus? A nucleus is a group of cell bodies. It's basically like a zone. And when these neurons start to clump together, cell body in the brain is a set of neurons. When the neurons clump together, forming a nucleus, they start to perform very, very specific tasks. Like in the hypothalamus, you would have a part that's in charge of love, like fear, go ahead and dream, go ahead and wake up, go ahead and breathe right, go ahead and like sweat, go ahead and what else is there? It would just keep going on and on, like digest, go ahead and like exercise. That's what happens in the body. Like all these things that you do, like how are you able to coordinate your billions of neurons and your trillions of cells and all your muscles, your organs? A lot of that coordination is happening because of the zones or the nuclei of the hypothalamus. So even if we introduce certain sciencey sounding words, being like nuclei, or nuclei is the plural, nucleus is the singular. If we're introducing a nucleus in the hypothalamus, at least you might be interested in opening up, let's say, okay, this is a nucleus. What is hiding inside that nucleus when you open it up? Okay, maybe that jumps out. Like maybe your session keeps opening the box of Pandora. Okay, they're breathing weird. or they're not, going deep, or they're seeing images, or they're bonding. So we're really opening the hypothalamic boxes. Oops. Yeah, let's open up the hypothalamic boxes slowly together. Oops. Yeah, just take them all out. So that's what the hypothalamus is. And then were you to get interested in this in the long term, you'd be asking the question, okay, if the hypothalamus is the regulator of all that, my normal metaphor for the hypothalamus is the one ring. You remember the Lord of the Rings, where there's a one ring that ruled them all. For me, that's the hypothalamus. There are actually these elements that speak to the hypothalamus, that can influence the hypothalamus, that determines like how are you going to, like, just for example, thinking about the heart rate. When you get people to lay down, and then when you do the thing that you do, from music to touch and so on and so forth, with when it comes to the heart, you can raise the heart rate, cardiac output, blood volume, more blood passing through the veins, um, and your heart needs to pump quicker as your body demands more oxygen because of changes that you made with the music and the way you're holding the body. So you might think that, okay, I'm causing that because my hands are in someone's chest and I'm sitting. Of course, when you're sitting in someone's belly, their heart rate's gonna increase because they're not able to breathe right, and then now they need more oxygen, and then you create more tension and anxiety, and then that's going to shoot through the roof. That could lead to a spiritual experience, but that has to be regulated somehow by something, like not just in the journey but beyond the session. Something needs to regulate that. um okay, so the question I'm posing is like, what are the parts of the brain that would maybe speak to the hypothalamus? Okay, what would they be? Okay, could it be that the um the amygdala speaks to the hypothalamus? That could be interesting, right? Like emotions. What if my emotions speaks to the regulator, so that if I'm anxious, I'm afraid, or I'm angry, what would that do to all the other functions of the body that's not related to emotions? What would that do to metabolism? What would that do to immunity if I was holding fear in my body? So there could be an interesting chain, right? There could be a chain of events, and there could have been something that happened before that, prior causalities that, okay, when someone heard, say, a specific sound, and that triggered a certain like emotion, and that led to heart rate increasing, then what you start to have is a map, and that map is in a way like sequential. Now you're able to order in time in your own mind, like a way to organize your own process, so that you're not just looking for the outcome. You're not just stuck with, I want to raise the heart rate because I somehow, if I raise the heart rate, something would happen to time perception. You raise the heart rate, that means that you're elevating the entire sympathetic nervous system's fight or flight and excite mechanisms. And when you're afraid, when you're fighting, when you're excited, something would happen to time. Would it slow down or would it speed up? Then when you reduce heart rate, then you're activating the parasympathetic nervous system. Something's going to happen to time. So it's really not just about the heart, brain, breath, and blood, right? Like all these operations start to influence each other. You change the rhythm of the heart. You change the breath rate is what it's called, and breath depth. Like you wouldn't breathe the same. Um, and then your whole brain would wire according to what's happening as well to your lower body. They would alter time because the body is manifesting a structure that had been on Earth for a long time. Okay, so let's still keep focusing on the hypothalamus. Before we look at the causality, let's look at basic endocrine structures that is organizing in nature. Okay, I'm trying to look for a way to get a thicker pen. Let's see. Fountain? No. I guess this is okay. Maybe I need to make it bigger. Okay, so the word axis is connotative of a kind of circuit. So in a way, you can treat multiple elements in the body as if it was one organ. Okay, it's still a chain. It's still a chain of events that take place in the body that would lead to some kind of outcome. So let's say, let's think of the outcome of stress. Where does that start if we were to look at the axes of the body? What is the stress axis of the body? Specifically, it would be called the HPA axis. And HPA means hypothalamic Okay, now for those who have studied the chakra system, supposedly the master gland that is the violet chakra is the pituitary gland, right? But here you're seeing that the hypothalamus actually governs the pituitary. That the pituitary is the master gland. It supposedly governs the other glands, whether it be the thyroid, the adrenal glands, the gonad glands, the pancreas, and so on and so forth. It's actually the hypothalamus that initially sends out the original signals. And then the pituitary gland would then send out its own signals to the corresponding target gland. So here we'd speak about the adrenal gland. So the HPA axis is the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Oops, sorry. Axis. So this is just one of the axes that we would be, let's just delete this. As an example, then opens you up to other axes. So let's say when you think about the adrenal gland, if you were to think about this in a chakra perspective, it would be the yellow. Yellow having to do with power, energy. When you require energy, the adrenal gland is responsible for sending out glucocorticoids, for example, like cortisol. And that's energy because what cortisol does is it helps in raising the amount of glucose. It raises glucose levels, blood glucose levels in the blood. And you know what sugar does? It then gives you enough energy to, let's say something was happening. Someone was, chasing you with a gun or a sword or, wanted to kill you with whatever, like a ball pen or a pizza, and you're super scared. So you're running away. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It's called a stress hormone, but it's actually a sugar mechanism. And as you know, pancreas would send out insulin to try to balance out the effects of glucose. So a lot of people who conduct processes, when you get people to lay down, you're already tapping into the HPA axis. So the literal action, let's say you start to see that there's something emanating from a certain part of the body, and there's a lot of power for sure that comes out of the adrenal area, you know, like it's norepinephrine or epinephrine, which is adrenaline. There's a lot of power there, right? There's a lot of energy there. When you try to raise that, like there's a lot of activity that starts to come out in what people call the kundalini. Um, there are physical manifestations of that, and when you try to raise that, that comes from a body part. But it should be useful for you to understand that the initial mechanisms begin like here, not in the third eye, the pineal gland. We'll talk about that another time or a little bit later. It's just to not literalize that you don't need to keep pressing in this body part because something's regulating it. It's coming from here. It's coming from deep in the middle of the brain, and that's the hypothalamus. So the axis would start with the hypothalamus sending out an initial messenger. It's called the CRH, which is corticotropin releasing hormone. So it's the first message. It's like okay, I need to get this person to wake up like in the morning. So I need to raise cortisol levels, but it doesn't start with cortisol. It starts with CRH or corticotropic releasing hormone. And then that would carry over to the pituitary. And then in the pituitary, you would be sending out um, the pituitary would be affected and it would be releasing ACTH, which is adrenocorticotropic hormone. I'll show you in the website where you can find that. So I'm not having to write that down. It takes too much energy for me. And then the adrenocorticotropic hormone would then speak to the adrenal cortex, the wrapper, the outer layer of the adrenal gland, and then you start to send out cortisol. So that's how stress actually works. It's based on a signaling mechanism, and because the hypothalamus is connected to all these other brain regions, because it's the hub, then stress is not a one-off thing. Okay, so that stress is not a one moment. It's a whole system that belongs to a much bigger system that's coordinated across dimensions. And when you power this up, like we received a question last week, when some people go to trainings, they're often tired, they're often exhausted for weeks, and that's supposed to be part of the integration period. But one of the reasons why people are tired is when we activate too much the HPA axis in the inner dance kundalini something, um, you know what happens to sugar when you crash, because when you have too much, then you also know what that's going to do with energy. Okay, your body needs to deal with that much, like what you're burning up, and what happens when you burn stuff. You need rest, you need to regenerate, and it becomes almost like a drug. Cortisol becomes like a drug along with other hormones and neurotransmitters that mix up. So in the last call, we made this quite specific. I'm not going to go over it so much today, but when cortisol meets with norepinephrine, that's coordinating it's coordinating the clock. The pacemaker of the heart is called the SA node or the sinoatrial node. It determines how fast or how slow your heart should be beating. Okay, when cortisol meets norepinephrine, and norepinephrine is also produced in the adrenal system, the adrenal medulla, the middle of the adrenal system. When cortisol mixes up with norepinephrine in the heart, that's when heart rate shoots through the roof. So then when it feels like your participants are having like a heart attack, it's because of the style in the music or the ways of touching the body that's bringing out what's beyond stress, which could be beautiful. Like raise that to the roof, and then people would explode, and then they would just fall into a black hole. You could achieve like a breakthrough in those moments. It's my issue with this is when that gets repeated over and over again in people's bodies because of the level of excitement or wanting, or then that just becomes an addiction, or like a dopamine system. Then that's when you really just start to normalize certain stress levels in the body, and the mind actually starts to shut down, and it becomes difficult to enter into REM states. So I think if facilitators didn't understand this system and they were being taught just to keep activating, like so much of those words, activating, transmitting, and so on and so forth, it becomes harder to balance. So you might start to see why the structure, like what's the point in understanding all of these? Like, okay, yeah, it begins with energy, but the signaling mechanisms for energy in the body are quite refined. They're quite sophisticated. They're quite beautiful. Okay, so that's one axis. Oops, that's one axis. Let's look at some other axes. So for example, there's also the HPT, hypothalamic pituitary thyroidal axis. Okay, I don't know how interested you are in the thyroid. The thyroid is supposed to be now so, let's color it up. The blue chakra has something to do supposedly with communication. The blue chakra does, but the thyroid specifically deals with metabolism, and metabolism is a balancing homeostatic device of the body. Not too much, not too little. It's really not up to the facilitator. It's up to the body itself. Like what is just right. So the thyroid is responsible for metabolic rates, and when the thyroid gets busy, gets in trouble, then all kinds of problems come up. So a lot of people are dealing with this. It's either hypo or hyperthyroidism. Actually, like a lot of problems in the body are unnamed, and a lot of them might be rooted in the HPT axis. So when you do bring people into inner dance states, you will be tapping into the HPT axis. So let's just write that down. Like the HPT axis coordinates itself in sleep and wake. For now, let's just study what it looks like. So let's say where you want to end up is in let's say the chain of events, the causal events. Let's say metabolism. What is metabolism anyway? Right? Metabolism is the ability to handle the old and the new. The old would be the catabolic. Catabolism would be breaking down the old stuff. Okay, like old cells that you don't need. You need to break them down. You don't want them anymore. You digest fat cells, even blood cells. You would need to regenerate. So you get rid of them, but only in a way that you break them down, so you could use the raw material to then anabolize. So the anabolic metabolic is what allows you to make new you. You know, so if your thyroid is weak, you wouldn't be able to make new cells properly. You wouldn't be able to conduct protein synthesis. And then you wouldn't be able to digest, um, you'd stay old. You just get old. And then that's when we get sick. That's when death starts to come through. So it's quite interesting that, again, like the process of laying down, could it actually affect the metabolic system? Right. So that's what the thyroid does. It's not just about communication, it's about breaking things down and making things new. So the hormones for metabolism would be the thyroid hormones, and you might just simplify it as T3, T4, maybe T5. I'm glad there's numbers so that we don't have to spell them out because there's some complexity there. So remember, like in the HPA axis, you had the like CRH that leads to ACTH. It's quite the same here. The hypothalamus would emit thyroid releasing hormone, and that would then communicate to the that would then communicate to the pituitary that you need to release thyroid stimulating hormone. Okay, so again, music, a body position, touch can affect the release of TRH and the release of TSH and the release of T3 and T4. And it doesn't begin here. Sometimes, there's a lot of stuff that happens in the throat. There's so much happening in the throat. People are coughing, retching, they're making sounds, they're releasing stuff there that's not entirely just repressed stuff that you weren't able to say to your dad or your mom or or people. It's sometimes as well chemical. There's a lot of imbalances there. It could still be related to communication for sure, but often it could be like a problem with the messaging or the chemical structure that's imbalanced that you're seeking to balance out. Okay, so that's the HPT axis. I shouldn't be spending so much time on these. But it's an introduction to these master systems. So the HPG axis would be the orange. Nope, that's not what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do. Okay, so what is the G and why is that orange? There's sexual dimorphism here. The we put gonads or gonadal, primarily because there's the men and the women. In the women, it would be the ovaries. And then in the men, it would be the testes. Okay, that then would produce either progesterone or estrogen, which are responsible for sexual characteristics or reproduction, but also could be bonding, like emotions. Testes would primarily be about testosterone. And testosterone is important for men. It helps to bring balance, but too much of it could lead to aggression, could lead to hypersexuality. Too much extra estrogen could lead to hypersexuality and also imbalance in women. But just right would be just right. So once again, we're looking at the hypothalamic pituitary axis in this. It's an axis. So if you were to look at a chain of events that organizes that, then the hypothalamus would then need to send out the initial signal once again, right? It would be like black. It's hard to see the orange. GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone would then release LH or FSH. Okay, now LH specifically becomes the estrogen or the what do you call this? The testosterone. FSH could lead to the production of egg cells in women or the production of sperm cells in men. So when that's imbalanced, then already there's problems with someone's sexual characteristics. I wouldn't say problems, but there would be differences there. But we could also say balance or imbalance when, let's say, there's problems with the menstrual cycle, the endometrium isn't able to push out or there's more pain in the menstruation period. Like sometimes when you get people to lay down, there are these changes in the moon cycle in women, or there's changes in the sexual character. So you can imagine when this is imbalanced in men, it could actually lead to aggression in men. It could lead to ego, could lead, too much testosterone. Depending on how the energy is activated, there might be hypersexuality there. There's nothing wrong with sexuality, obviously, but there's something to look at when there's hypersexuality involved. Because when people are coming from a lack of self-esteem and are really, needing, wanting, then it could also be balanced out. So what would be interesting to look at with the HP axes is if you have you look at the letter R, when you have the releasing factors, these are called releasing factors, releasing hormones. Remember CRH, corticotropin releasing hormone, gonadotropin releasing hormone, thyroid, TSH, TRH. Uh, if you have the releasing stimulating hormones, you actually also have um, the inhibitory hormones. You can have corticotropin inhibitory hormone or the gonadotropin inhibiting hormone. The uh, okay, so that means that you do have the power to not just sorry, just keep pressing go. Press on. You can also like stop because you can say, okay, it's enough. It's it's good already. So you would need to then learn the mechanisms in music, touch, words, that we would study slowly to slow down. Okay, these are things to take up in the future. For now, it's just to give you an overall picture on how the body functions. That this one small gland actually has all this power to regulate the body. Okay, so beyond the axes, there are these other interesting hormones that are readily obvious in the process that we do. Firstly, like oxytocin. Oxytocin would be the drug of choice if you were to conduct the inner dance, and any such process that's based on the initial structures inner dance had uh, conducted. Oxytocin is the trust chemical. Like you want everyone to be in trust when you open the space. So oxytocin must be released from either the paraventricular nucleus of the hypothalamus or the supraoptic nucleus. I'll show you the site where you can find that later. Um, and then people would open. You would open the space. People would feel safe. If there is a lack or absence of oxytocin, then people wouldn't trust. They would like just doubt. They would be skeptical. Um, you want them to trust you, want them to trust the space, but because you want them to trust themselves. And a lot of people's issues is they're just not trusting. They lost trust. So oxytocin is something that could arise just in the ways that you are holding the space. Now, the primary function of oxytocin from the point of view of evolution had been to manage childbirth. And specifically, it's the uterine contractions that happens in childbirth. Now, uterine contractions actually doesn't need to take place during childbirth. So it is not a coincidence that when you like raise oxytocin levels in the process, like the love hormone, and the love hormone could easily shift into an aggression hormone when there's too much. You can actually send out uterine, you can actually influence uterine contractions in the bodies of women, even if they're not giving birth. So that is already one explanation as to why does the body do that in the stages of the process. It's because we are sending out quite a lot of oxytocin, like we're creating a space of love and we're sending out the love chemical, and the love chemical is going to affect the body in a certain way. The other thing to look at in terms of oxytocin is it's designed still with evolution to create the bonding relationship between the mother and the offspring, like the children. And one of the reasons why oxytocin becomes a chemical of aggression is bonding with, let's say, your people. It's called kin. People who belong to your family or your tribe. You can't really fall in love with the whole universe. This is anyway in the Darwin survival of the fittest, natural selection mode. So anyone who doesn't belong to um, our tribe, we don't trust because we don't have enough energy and resources to work with them. So initially, tribal mechanisms are founded on um, a chemical agent called oxytocin. So now there are different tribes, like people living in spiritual bubbles, like you belong to my tribe, and we're all elevating our oxytocin levels together. But then there could be levels of competition between facilitators that you might have already noticed. It's because of these raised hormones that when there's just the overactivation of these, it doesn't take much for that love process that happens in the journeys to turn into competition uh, and like not connection but consumption. Um, it needs to still observe balance, and that's where the hypothalamus would keep coming into the picture. Like all the mechanisms that you hold bears like a lot of influence. So just wanted to bring up oxytocin now because we will be bringing up certain brain areas that would still map out oxytocin. Interestingly, because oxytocin does hold powerful balancing elements. Okay, wait. You would have to watch the call from yesterday to maybe clarify. Okay, when does oxytocin shift us into aggression? Okay, so let's look a little bit deeper into the brain. I'm interested in doing this. So right now we're looking at the hypothalamus. Now, what we're interested in is who is going to talk to the hypothalamus. And I want to bring up certain brain regions we've already covered like before. So let's say orange is very emotional. Let's say orange would be on this brain region, the amygdala. Okay. So we studied the amygdala. Remember our last our first calls for the second wave, we spoke about the basal. Remember, we talked about the basolateral amygdala, which is the part of the amygdala that is conditioned by external events in the world. So this is what learns fear. Fear isn't always there. You have to condition yourself. You have to learn the fear. And then you had the central, this is how you spell central amygdala, somewhere in the middle, like the nucleus. It's more the phobias or the fears that were there before you came here. The fear of falling down, the fear of loud noises. These are the natural fears of babies. So this is the amygdala, and it wouldn't be hard for you to maybe think about this, that there has to be some direct connection from the amygdala to the hypothalamus. Okay, understanding that the hypothalamus is the regulator. It's trying to coordinate everything. But fear, sadness, depression, joy can speak to that. So depending on your mood, depending on your emotion would speak to your to everything else. Like it would need to access the hub, need to access the hub. Now, let's name this particular circuit. Like these circuits for me is what we're lighting up. A circuit is a nerve tract. It's a white matter structure, white brain, yeah, because it's myelinated. It's like axons. This is the transmission. If we were to use that word, this is the transmission. So the name for this is the stria terminalis. And this is a very important structure in the inner dance because it would explain a lot of the emotional explosions that takes place in the process. Now, remember in when we went over the calls 2 weeks ago, especially the call number 2, we spoke about like this interesting brain part that sends out the theta rhythm. Okay, let's name that. We named it as the medial septum, but right now let's just call it the septal area. The septal area would still be considered a part of the limbic system. It's still responsible for memory. Now, remember, like this sends out the theta waves. So when you perform music, this helps to slow down or regulate or speed up the like memories are involved, emotions are involved. So they're speaking to each other. And okay, let's bring back something we spoke about 2 weeks ago. Let's put it here. Still important. It's like when you say learn, it means building a memory or memorizing fear. So you would remember. It's wrong for you not to remember the part of your brain that remembers. You have to remember the part of your brain that remembers. So it's the hippocampus. So as you well know, the hippocampus is talking to the amygdala. They're close to each other. But then the hippocampus is also speaking to the septal area. This is what we discussed in our last calls. And the septal area is also speaking to the hypothalamus and vice versa. They're all speaking to each other. They're learning from each other to either deal with anxiety or deal with aggression, fear, to deal with balance, and so on and so forth. Okay, so why are we talking about this? Again, you need to keep asking that question. Why is this important? Why is this important? Why is this important? Um, somewhere amidst the stria, okay, remember the stria terminalis, which is a circuit. Now, when we went into the website, I brought up this new brain region that I was interested in bringing up, and it is called the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis. Okay, so it's just a brain region with that within the stria terminalis. It's not a circuit; it's an actual nucleus. So it's somewhere here in the middle. Okay, so why is this important? Let's call this BNST, so as to simplify the bed nucleus for stria of the stria terminalis. So it's a brain region that's affected in the inner dance process. Okay, so the hypothalamus, remember, sends out oxytocin. Oxytocin that brings about the uterine contractions, moving the body as if it was giving birth. I've been noticing that for the longest time. Why does it do that? So now we're implicating it. Oxytocin partly goes to the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis. There's a lot of oxytocin receptors in the BNST. And there's something here whereby the BNST is always in communication as well with the hypothalamus. And okay, the BNST is more or less like the extended amygdala. So if you were to talk about fear, okay, let's compare it. Like, okay, if the amygdala is fear-based, every time you light up or trigger, you stimulate the amygdala, an organism would like become afraid. There's fear in the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, but it's not the same fear. It's not immediate fear. It's not real fear. Okay. It's called future fear. And if you name what is future fear, it's called anxiety. It's to be afraid of the things that are not there, you know. Like it's not there. It hasn't happened yet. I'm afraid. I'm over planning. I'm anxious. A lot of people have that. So if you want to heal anxiety, do you know what the medicine is for anxiety? It's actually oxytocin. So when oxytocin enters the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis, what happens is anxiety could be reduced. So here's still another aspect of balance for you to think about. Okay. Primarily, what is important here, and I know this is a lot of science for you to take in, the specific place, and this is quite elegant, the specific place, or let's say the very, trying to look for a color, the exact place in which the BNST would enter the hypothalamus is a nucleus in the hypothalamus. And this is called the um, paraventricular nucleus. And I want to open this up and specifically. If we are going to look at one nucleus today, it's this one. Just to help you meet the hypothalamus. Okay, let me close this. Okay, I think I need to then open up another website. For one reason or another, it's only openable through Google Chrome. Now it's opening. Okay, so I have a Prezi that organizes the hypothalamus. And if you want access to this, just write me, and I'll give you the link, or we could just publish this in the groups if you're not afraid of the hypothalamus anyway. This is for long-term research. So this is the hypothalamus, okay? Don't get scared. 2 weeks ago, we brought up a part. This is the suprachiasmatic nucleus, which was, remember, the SCN, very sensitive to light. So when you're exposed to light, you're inhibiting the pineal gland, so it's not sending melatonin. So you're not going to sleep. You're not going to the dream. You're not going to REM state or SWS. But when you expose a person to darkness, say you ask them to lay down, you dim the room, close the eyes, you then release melatonin in the pineal gland if you're using certain kinds of music. So that's one of the parts of the hypothalamus. There are other parts. I would just ask you to look or watch the other video from 2 days back to understand. So the paraventricular nucleus, you remember, we have already talked about TRH, CRH, GnRH should be here. But it's the same place that oxytocin is received. So okay, I wanna talk about this. I wanna at least explain to you why that's important. Just so you learn to read the brain. I'm just giving you a reading of the brain, inner dance style. So the paraventricular nucleus, just one nucleus in the hypothalamus, is responsible for sending out the RH, which is metabolism, as you know now. CRH, which is stress. or, energy, blood sugar levels, GnRH, which is sexuality, bonding, um, uh, like menstruation. And then you have oxytocin. And what you're seeing here is they're feeding each other. The paraventricular nucleus then would speak to the entire rest of the body. There would be these circuits here that would extend all the way to the spine. This is how it works. This is an endocrine system where you would have, let's say, the thyroid. Let's say that the heart is here. Let's say the adrenaline is here, adrenal cortex. Let's say the gonads are here. There's a whole system. It's chakra based when you think about it. You have the blue chakra here. You have the green, which would be the thymus. You'd have the yellow here, and then you'd have the orange here. It's very spiritual when you start to understand this system. So depending on then what messages are getting sent out, there needs to be some kind of coordination here in regards to the autonomic nervous system, where you then to study the autonomic nervous system, then depending on the signaling mechanisms that you're creating in the sessions that you're doing, whether it be scary, okay, I want them to confront their fear, I'm going to scare them, then that's when that determines the activation of the fight or flight, which is from T1 to L2. Okay, this whole range would enact, the heartbeat would now beat faster, increase your heart rate, increase your blood pressure, dilate your pupils, breath rate increases because you're scared. You're now in fight or flight. And a lot of that have chemical connections, but it's also to do with the sound. A lot of that's being interpreted in the brain, whether the place is safe or not. And then the parasympathetic would be here, like the sacral or the cranium. So this is just to state that changes that you're doing chemically would then be neural, because the autonomic nervous system doesn't just work with chemicals. The autonomic nervous, oops, can't see the yellow. The autonomic nervous system communicates not through chemicals, but through electricity. It sends out action potentials that carries electrical signals throughout the whole body. Okay, so from here, you'd have all these extensions now. Complicated as it might be, or sound, all of that is still here. Okay, there's still one part of your body that's coordinating love and fear. But what you're seeing here is love is actually fear, because a lot of people's renditions of love is conditional love, it's tribal love, it's love for the family, but not love that's unconditional. So you can see what you're doing here is you're changing a lot of that, understanding that oxytocin normally is functioning in a certain way. We wanted to change that function. Just that simple aspect of speaking to the bed nucleus of the stria terminalis that got influenced by the amygdala, that it learned the fear, and now it's trying to store the fear here, because the amygdala is using the circuit to communicate to the hub, but passing through that circuit, it actually stored this trauma. There's this trauma here that is now influencing behavior, influencing personality. Now someone's neurotic, someone's psychotic. It had to start from somewhere. You might have to go back to the earlier video that looked at how you make the fear extinct rather than to program it. How do you change it? You need to undergo fear extinction. And everything that we're doing in the journey process, it is somewhat like bringing that about. Okay, so that's yeah, that's the hypothalamus. I now want to go back to the, because we introduced today as a conversation around like time. Let's now get to that, and then I will end, and then we can open up for discussions soon. So question is like time. What is time in the brain and in the body? Um, like technically you remember the medial septum, like which is here, that sort of has a time holding construct because it helps to organize. You remember what frequencies are now. They help to sequence events one thing at a time. Otherwise, you would just be mashing them up, mixing them up like mud. All these memories, these episodes, they're all like mushed up together. And many types of techniques, they really just would do that. It's just mush up together where everything's happening at the same time. And you call that an inner dance session. But there is a part of the brain that learns to organize that. The medial septum is one. There are many timekeeping elements in the body, actually, like in the hippocampus, you would have time cells. You remember the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the SCN, the timekeeper of the hypothalamus that would send out melatonin. Okay, there's clocks there. But primarily, what is the most interesting timekeeping, in the most primal anyway, is in the basal ganglia. All right, now this is pure inner dance framework. This is pure inner dance science. We've already brought this up, and I will remind you what the basal ganglia is. So remember, we talked about music, and when you create these abrupt changes in the music, let's say the music sequence from this music, that music, that music, that, when you create the abrupt shifts from slow, make it fast, slow down, fast, those abrupt changes have this habit of affecting the striatum. The striatum is what I used to call the spiritual doorway of the brain. It's also like the primitive brain. So if you want to open up the brain, want the brain to explode, you would be sending dopamine to the striatum. And it has something to do with the creation of novelty. Okay. Now, dopamine, as you well know, is related to addiction and anticipation and wanting and expectation. So the dopamine wants to be sent out to, like the emotional part, the prefrontal cortex part, which is attention. It's the nucleus accumbens, which should be pleasure and motor functions. So dopamine is not sent to the striatum when there's no novelty. Okay, when everything is just the things that I know, the things that I can expect, the not so strange things, the things that I want to happen, when I'm trying to control, I'm expecting. So when you create an abrupt change, that is when dopamine gets sent to the striatum rather than those other normal centers. You remember the mesolimbic and mesocortical pathway, the prefrontal cortex or the amygdala. I want to feel good, so I want to send it out to my emotional, feeling based part of the brain. So when you create something unfamiliar, you actually break addiction. So when you create unfamiliar changes that are particularly abrupt, dopamine is then sent to the striatum. And so go back to the first video when we talked about this. There were these four different dopamine pathways: the mesocortical, the mesolimbic. Uh, you might remember when we spoke about the tuberoinfundibular pathway, which is responsible for prolactin. Do you remember? If you watch that, prolactin is to do with intelligence, but also levels of psychosis and schizophrenia. I'm not going to talk about that today. The third pathway that I did not explain so much is the nigro nigro striatal pathway. So this is something you can research later on, more so if my explanation isn't going to be as comprehensive. It's called the nigrostriatal pathway because dopamine is being sent out through what's called the substantia nigra. And if you were to map that out, it would be here in the in the brainstem. It would be somewhere here, deep in the lower part of the brain, near the spine. So this is where dopamine gets sent out, and then it would need to speak to the basal ganglia. Okay, let's look at least what the basal ganglia looks like. If you wanted to study this more, you would just have to tell me. Otherwise, not today, but later on, because uh, there's some complexities here. Okay, so this is this is the limbic system, and the basal ganglia is the caudate and the putamen. It's these two. Okay, remember the amygdala is the emotional. Um, it's the emotional part of the brain. The hippocampus is memory. They're all close to each other. The thalamus is what receives the sounds, the images that you hear. It's all processing that at the same time. Okay, making decisions. Now, the caudate and the putamen is part of the basal ganglia and is the striatum itself. What you're looking at is a striatum. It's these two, the putamen and the caudate. And when it receives dopamine, this is what it does. Um, we're gonna simplify this now. So thank you for holding up. It holds time, and the basal ganglia is responsible for setting rhythm. So here's where you see that dopamine isn't really just an addictive substance. Dopamine actually helps to set the rhythm. So depending on how much dopamine is being sent to the striatum, you can actually, it's quite beautiful how this all lands. You can either slow down time perception, or you can speed it up, make time go faster. So when you then go into the session space, when you're using music, you might understand why are we using music now, actually, because the basal ganglia is one of the most sensitive parts of the brain to rhythm. That when you expose the body to rhythm, the basal ganglia will hear the rhythm. Maybe there are other parts of the brain that would hear the tone, the texture, the harmony, the melody, but the part of the brain that hears the drum, the drum beat. There's a part of the brain that heard the drum beat that creates rhythm cycles, repetitions. It's the old brain. It's the basal ganglia. It's a striatum. So you can see how much control you have on time perception, that you can manipulate time easily through the use of music. And later we will develop tools. We would teach you the musical tools. So you're not just dependent on Spotify songs. Now you see why you would learn to speed up or slow down the music live, on the spot. That's why you would need a DJ app. That's why you can work with certain tools, or you would choose slower or faster songs. That's it. Songs we don't normally work with, because when you start a song, it's hard to change it in mid rhythm. So here, let's go back to the transition elements. It's really not just the speed that creates the dopamine rerouting. It could also be to do with volume or intensity. It could also be, like texture would be how many layers are you bringing in, like a few or a lot. Then you can just keep switching from one to the other. But yeah, tempo or rhythm. Okay, so let's talk about rhythm then. Now that we're getting to this part, in looking at the basal ganglia. Rhythm can be entrained from an external space, meaning when people hear rhythm from outside, the basal ganglia might achieve that rhythm, but the real basal ganglia rhythm is usually something that it needs to generate internally. So this is something you can learn to facilitate. That when you learn to expose people to the music that you're using, and then the way you're holding them through touch or through presence. The real independence comes when the person is now generating its own rhythm. And when it does so, the basal ganglia then would speak to the hypothalamus, and then possibly if you're managing time in a responsible and beautiful and harmonic way, that rhythm would find balance. This is one of the big justifications of what are we doing? What's the point? Why are we even doing this? We're speaking to the hypothalamus. And because the hypothalamus is spoken to by emotions, let's say, remember, hippocampus is memory, emotions, basal ganglia, primitive brain, striatum, like rhythm. So let's say, like, what is it about rhythm anyway? Like for some people, the rhythm might have slowed down too fast, maybe because of stuckness, and you would like to speed it up. Maybe for some people, they're moving too fast, they're too speedy, and you want them to slow down. Then why would you give everyone the same time signature, the same metric, the same cycle? People have different rhythms. So what you do when you do have different groups is you would oscillate. And you know what an oscillation is? It's like sometimes it's this. So you would give them diversity, you would give them difference. Okay. You wouldn't just try to get stuck with this is my goal. I want them to go fast. You would learn the system in the body, and this is really just an introduction. So we would go deeper into this in our next round of talks. But just to give you something that you can start using if you are holding a space. Remember, like the inner dance works with change agents or change process. So there's something about moving from one to the other that creates the actual sound. It's not the particular sound, it's the movement from one sound to the other that activates the circuits in the brain to achieve what we might call a non-dual state, because it's getting exposed to the polarizations, the extremes. Then they're able to hold both. So when you work with changes, you have to work with specific stages in the journey. And so here, let's say, okay, you're introducing something new, and you learn this technique that the brain doesn't like to get bored. You always have to introduce something new to the brain, and then it gets activated. So it's not just addiction. Like a child, we're always in wonder and in awe. We're tired of the old. As soon as something new comes later on, that becomes old, and then it's looking for something new. That's how growth happens. So when you learn playlisting, and we'll go deeper into this more and more. Okay, let's say you start with one, and this is where you began. The first stage would be the introduction. Okay, and there are brain elements here. I'm not going to go too deep, and I won't go into it anymore. We've gone into it enough. Maybe here's where you can ground or make practical what's been shared. So this you introduce. Say number one, you introduce. And now you're going to change from this to, let's say, I'm going to change it up to here. But when you do that, you will actually still have the residue of this thing there, right? So when you introduce, let's say the first, let's say this, I introduced that, so I'm getting used to that. Second stage should be like acclimatize, which is people need to get used to what had been introduced. So let's say this is number one, and then they had gotten used to that, but then now you're about to introduce, let's say, number two. When you introduce number two here, there would be the residue of number one here. So there would actually be like here there's one, there's two. There's two frequencies or two energies. There's the black and then there's the red. And then after the acclimatization, there would be like a stabilization. And I don't know what the perfect combination of black and red would look like. If this is a color thing, then let's just say we're making something up that's like black and red. It's not really there. It's like maybe black, red, something. Two again become one during the stabilization stage. And then you would repeat where once again you would create another change. So when you do that, what would happen is, just to describe what's happening in the brain, at least without really talking about the brain parts. When you keep doing that, and then there have been so many different colors, for example, it's now mixing up. Let's say you have a little bit of that. You have all these residues like mixing up together. Okay. And then you add more colors here and so on and so forth. What would happen is if you know what you're doing anyway, what the brain would do is it would be working with all these, let's say, different rhythms, right? That doesn't look stable. Maybe you're working, let's say you have your grid, and then maybe you're working with these different rhythms. Up. Sorry. Let's say what the it thinks I'm trying to erase it. What your brain's constantly trying to do is to, like, just to go back to where we started, to organize all of it, like all these brain parts, all these chemicals, all these electrical pathways, these circuits. All they're trying to do is to synchronize or organize. And the more variety you bring in, the more they have to organize. The more diversity is there. But in truth, in the brain, there's so much information there. Like honestly, like there's so much information there. So the process of acclimatizing to a specific rhythm is important. But this will be confusing primarily as you are going to be asked to keep changing the rhythms across a time scale, because that's how dopamine gets rerouted and then gets mixed up with, serotonin, oxytocin, acetylcholine, melatonin, and so on and so forth. So what you're actually trying to do is to balance like a stability and like change. So change normally comes with these manifestations. Like these are questions. These are questions that you would ask in the long term. Like depending on who's in the room, are they holding on to repressed, like this emotions? Are they hiding certain things? But when it's not there anymore, why would you keep like forcing that? It would be a problem if you have a mixed room where there are people who are already on the way to here, but there are people who are nowhere there. They're literally just like here. So this is the sequence. This is how a playlist is constructed. Obviously, you need to work with here, but there are a lot of people who have been in this loop for quite a while already. This process of change, of getting reintroduced, old and new, always, so there will be times when you would be called to work more with just stabilizing what they have acclimatized to already. They're still, they're silent, they're unmoving, they're not really, rocking, shaking, rolling around. And so uh it's too early to bring this up, but okay, maybe okay. Let's let, let's 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 just close this. This is the brain, and the brain is in a process of change. It's also in a stage, and it's in a change process, right? It's in a process of change. But for those who have been in a lot of change over the years, over the months, you deserve number three. You deserve number three. So when the changes have already taken place, now is the time for you to stabilize. Are you good already? Are you happy? And normally that's when learning begins to take place. So here's my point. When you discover like a master rhythm, and this is to wonder what your hypothalamus probably looks like now as compared to years ago. There are brain um, waves, there are oscillations that may not be familiar to you. They will be novel. Um, so when you study rhythm, there are there's something called the rate of greatest salience. There's recognizable rhythm, and there's a whole range of that. It could either be something like around 60 to 180 BPM or beats per minute. Because when you do music, a lot of it would center around specific BPM levels. Like normally it would be around 80. Most songs would be from 80 to 100. But there's inner dance musics that actually go beyond this recognizable range. Okay, so there's a lot of unrecognizable rhythms in the inner dance, primarily because the higher ranges, beyond that, let's say 300, maybe even more than that, sometimes 250, 300, 400. I sometimes go beyond that while also holding very, very slow BPM levels alongside it. These faster BPMs hold much more information. And that's why I'm working with the basal ganglia in different ways. I'm not triggering dopamine elements in the basal ganglia in normal ways. Sometimes I can trigger them in the normal ways, but remember, this is the amygdala. This is emotions. When you trigger emotions, and when emotions tend to get repetitive, then you actually start to limit the range. You would stay within a range of, let's say, 40 to, let's say, 100, which would be very human ranges. But if you wanted to go into like cosmic or planetary information, this is uh this is our main topic. Like, what is time to you? What really is time? Um, let's go to the website and free it up. Free up my. Okay, we really should be working on this website more. But we're, like inner dance. going into it in the process. So when you ask this question to people, like what is time? You know, the Manila facilitator, like this is her first inner dance. Um, I saw myself in a deep pit, flying, gazing at the sky. I saw myself in a white dress, standing in a rock, looking at the vast ocean. But according to her, like she was remembering what it meant to have been on Earth, like for a long time, because this is how we hold inner dance in many ways. It's not just the person, because the inner dance is coming from what is outside or inside the person, not just like the person conglomerated as like an identity. When we ask this, how would you hold your process? I think here is my favorite. I think I no wait, life on A. Sorry. The first time I ever asked that question in like it was in a demo, and it was this with this woman. I think she's got something here. This is what she wrote later on. This is way back in 2018. I saw linear time expressed as a single viewpoint, as if it was possible to take in all that is, to have access to everything at once. And literally in her story, she remembered the whole earth. She went through the whole history of the earth in the matter of like an hour, like a minute. Um, so we're being given a lot of power, and it takes responsibility. Like we're changing brains. We're changing the rhythm of the brain. And and the thing is, there's so many rhythms that's being coordinated by the one rhythm. So your hypothalamus with your basal ganglia, your hypothalamus is in charge of your rhythms. So some weeks ago, we talked about the circadian rhythm, sleep and wake, night and day, light and dark, seasons, 12 months in the year, summer, winter, spring, like autumn. Um, like sometimes you're going through your winter, even if it's not cold, you're going through your own winter. Sometimes you're going through your own spring, your own summer. It's too hot. Just want spring, like fresh. You actually have control. It doesn't matter what's going on outside you. There are aspects of the brain through what we are learning, what we're being offered by the mother. You have control over your own rhythm. You can acclimatize, you can stabilize, you can introduce, you can change. It's all up to you where we would end up, like tomorrow, next year. So thank you for learning with me, with all of us, how this works, a bit at a time, unraveling the secrets, making the invisible visible more and more again and again through not just looping or generalizing over simplifying everything is energy. Let's talk about it again, again, and again. We're in each call taking up one specific viewpoint of the infinite that is like embedded, like somehow mirroring in your system. So when you talk about the body, what is embodiment? What is time? And is time really just an abstract concept that could also just be in my wrist? When I look at this, or when I look at my phone, there are these numbers. It says, what time is it? They're real mechanisms, and they're quite old. And the thing is, like almost overnight, not just with the inner dance or the energy process, um, with the internet, with cell phones, with the power to harness electricity. There's so much information. So it's all happening like together at the same time. Like music is the most powerful technology that transitions us there, that makes that visible, that creates the mirror. But there's all these other things happening around the world, and you're just listening to a man who spent a lot of time alone experimenting on his own body and his own brain. And when I shared that over the years across the world, I was taking notes. Okay, what's happening here? So these are my notes. I hope that you are getting something from this, that this is useful. Thank you so much for, yeah, just taking this in. So there might be interesting questions in this demystification of, what used to be religious, really getting to understand what we are, certain revelations, insights, reflections, say, oh, okay, I think I'm understanding what is happening before. Okay, so I give it to you. Becca, start with you.
Hi. Um, I mean, I'm absorbing so much, but a practical question would be, is there a playlist that you already have that you would recommend to experiment with that has the 300 BPM already in it, since we haven't gotten to the building our own yet?
Okay. It's actually hidden in the some of the sleep playlists.
Okay, cool.
We're
That's really
hiding.
been working on my husband.
Good.
He's sleeping
The
like crazy.
the super fast is in the super slow. It's specifically in the later versions of Rest and Digest. You would have
Great.
these synthesizers that are hiding inside the soft tones, so it would seem like it's not triggering, but the trigger mechanisms are happening so fast. It's so refined that it doesn't feel like you're getting triggered. So it takes you somewhere more gentle, but it's actually intense in a different way.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Cassia. Yeah.
Hi,
There.
hello. Hello. Yes, I have also a question about playlists. Like I was speaking with you a few days ago about this playlist called White Orange, right? White Orange, right? So you was talking about creating playlists. I frequency waves do you have on that playlist? Because I'm thinking what happened with my fiance that he was so weird after listening that White Orange. Really, like he go away energetically from me. He didn't want to speak with me, but I was in a very good mood. I was feeling like I am a light. No, at the beginning it was like a very deep state, but I also enjoy it. And after that, it was a lot more lighter, but I was feeling a lot of love and light, and I was feeling really um, like I don't have a big weight. So I'm really interested how this white orange
Mm,
is made.
mm,
That this was such a um, weird, you know,
mm.
work,
Yeah.
work, a
Okay.
big, difference. Yeah.
Okay. White orange was weird. So the question always is, let's say you're constructing your own soundscapes, your playlists later on. When you think about the autonomic nervous system, the art and science and spirit there has always been, how do you open people up, create safety? People are trusting, and then when they're open, you would trigger them. So the question is the safety and the opening and the trusting is usually generic, meaning any relaxing music would normally work. Like that's usually in the beginning. It's the trigger elements that's usually interesting because the question is what would be your triggers? And in White Orange, my triggers were partly rhythmic, where I was changing the rhythm again and again, almost like too much. That's hard to handle for most people. So I should put a warning label on white orange, and butterfly effects is the even super weirder one. White orange was one of the first times I actually put in my own voice, and I was making weird sounds with my voice. So the particular thing in white orange, and thank you for asking this because this helps me to explain something I wasn't able to close well, and that's why the questions are good. Um, the white orange destabilizes people. The design of that is to create instability so that you could find stability from inside. So the difference there was for you, you were able to find stability during the process of destabilizing. So remember when I talked about the basal ganglia, you can entrain it through an external rhythm, but what the basal ganglia is actually trying to do is to find its own rhythm. So let's say when you hear 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 rhythms, at the end of the day, it's going to create a one rhythm. It's going to create oneness. So that's what you were able to do. And that's what your fiance couldn't handle. He could handle it, but it had to be after the process. That's also part of the process. So it could have been the day after, 2 days after, where he's still processing. You know, when people say he's processing, she's processing, that's one of the explanations that they're still trying to synchronize layers of information, layers of data that are either like unclear or clear. But a lot of this would be nonlinear. It's nonverbal um, elements. So this is what the body's trying to do. You were able to do that, but I wasn't giving much to hold on to in white orange, and I was scared to put that onto the world even. But the other one, butterfly effects, is even like a lot weirder, where I took the sounds of other humans making the weirdest sounds I've ever heard, and I put them in there, and I wasn't sure, am I going to send this out? And I did, and some people tend to really like it, and then some people they run out of the room like that's when I was really experimenting with bringing people into the edge. And when I made these were for people who were all the way out there. They weren't designed for beginners. So I guess there are people who have died many deaths. I would say that's partly you. There's a lot of us who have been shattered so many times that we're now like water. You know, you can give anything to a cassia and then you would just, it's all one thing. I'm not making decisions, but for those who are still, like a little bit in control and a little bit wanting to hold on, and a lot of those would be more men than women. They're not water. They're more like like this or that. Okay, thank you. Deanna.
Thank you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. This is an amazing Zoom, and the one before also. Thank you very much. I've been dealing with a person with working with him. He's letting me practice on him. He has insomnia due to, I came about that due to a lot of fear. And I've noticed that fear has many faces and a lot of addictions with it. And I just want to say thank you, because this is a lot of information that definitely will help me understand more about these explosions due to hormones. The thing is that I would really like to learn more about the music. I don't know if I need to confront his fears, playing playlists that are a little bit like you're saying, like butterflies or this type of, or more like Shakti Shanti type of music. I don't know. I don't know what to do about it. And also very interested in the voice cues and
Yeah,
touch.
that's it.
You said before that we're going into that
Yeah.
later on, right?
Mm. after providing the framework and what's happening internally, then we would bring in the tools. I think when we talk about fear, the most lasting change agent is words. But we would have a hard time working with words if we don't have a way of mapping. It's because when it states as fear, we just see it as the energy of fear, but it needs to rise up to the level of feelings. Feelings is below thought. Okay, like emotions should be below feelings, and fear is an emotion. Below emotion would be metabolism, immunity. These are like still emotional, but they're like more metabolic, more like it's operating on a much like faster oscillatory frequency. Now, letting it rise up to the level of feeling, when we're using words, let's say you, depending on your closeness or intimacy or, relationship with a person, you either are talking to them before the process and you're either mapping it out on paper, or inside you're seeing, okay, this person dealing with a lack of like honesty, communication, lack of truth, lack of support, lack of resources, lack of power, lack of creativity. It's usually coming from lack. So when you start to hold a person, whatever playlist you use, we still need to be able to speak to the fear, because like what are you afraid of? And what is happening in a lot of people is they hide the fear, and it became the body. It got stuck in the body. So later we would learn how to match the frequencies and the rhythms with the words. There has to be a way to psychologically map the colors. And because you were in Maya, then it would come to you. Ah, yeah, we did talk about the colors. We did talk about the statements or the stuckness that's in the colors. So coordinating what we know now about the body, coordinating what we are learning about, like music is frequency, which would rise and fall, which would bring people into different layers of intensity. Then the psychology part would be the next, actually. It's it's mapping, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
very interesting.
Mm,
Thank you very much.
okay. Corinne?
Yes, hi. I have two questions. The first one is you tell us about adapting to each people and the audience we have, and that makes sense. The thing is, what happens when you have people you have never met and they come to a group of people? I mean, when you have a private session, it's certainly easier, but when you have a group of people and you have a mix of people who you know and who already came to the station and others know, do you ask some things before, or is it just you assume that they're new and they will have blockages and emotions will come up, but it depends on each one's process, right? So that's my first question. And the second question is about the demo. We are speaking about rhythm in the session, and what's about the demo?
Wait, and you're generalizing the demo, like you would like to ask about it in general?
No, not in general, but what's
What's the point?
Yeah, and how does it fit into the rhythm that we want to bring to the station, or is that a part, or what's the aim of it, let's say, within the rhythm and the frequency?
Yes, okay, wonderful. Okay, so the first would be everyone's coming in with their own rhythm. Some people are coming from a yoga class, the other one's coming from the stock market, some is coming from an argument with the husband. So there's all these rhythms. This is why a playlist was created, and a playlist is that which holds diversity. Diversity means you need to be you need to be able to touch multiple emotions that will be there. So talking about time and space, you always need to work with time. So time works in a sequence where story, some kind of story is going to come out. And a story needs to have a beginning, an ending, and something in the middle, right? So that middle place is a big middle. And what would happen, okay, in terms of time and space, so we're talking about diversity. Let's say, okay, I'm taking them through step, let's say I started with number one, number two, and then by number two or number three, the story starts to appear actually. So what you normally would need if you were adapting is a way to adjust on the spot. You would need to be able to speak to the change while it's changing. You don't the mistake a lot of people make in the beginning is it's okay in the beginning, which is to create a sequence beforehand. Okay, start in this way, and then I'm going to make a list. But that doesn't speak to the group space that will be diverse. So you would need to be able to draw out frequencies as they come up. And because they're diverse, right? You need to be able to either listen to what will come up, but you also need to evoke what might not come up, that you are like hearing from a much deeper place. That's why diversity is important. Diversity in your toolkit would be a vocabulary. You need like a whole set of frequencies that's not too mono, that's not too like each other. Because one of the things that we're doing is that, you know, the brain works with pain avoidance, pleasure seeking elements. And so for you to bring stuff out of them, you need to be able to trigger the brain and the body in certain ways. So what the brain normally likes to do when it listens to music is it likes to group certain sounds to either based on a personal preference, or when it hears something, it will want to associate something that sounds like it. It sounds like it. So what you would want to do is to look for things that's not like that, that would follow that. That's usually what creates the rerouting of dopamine from the substantia nigra into the striatum. That's what novelty means. When you give them something unexpected, when you shock them, that's usually when a whole bunch of neurotransmitters would flood through. So you need to learn the language of contrast, oppositions, and paradox, because the brain doesn't like contradictions. What it likes is associations. You're partly there to break the association so that you give them something they weren't expecting. So let's say they're seeing like a dragon, and then suddenly that becomes like a flower, that suddenly they cry, and suddenly that becomes their mom. That's what happens in the dream. There are synchronizations of like information that's really far away from each other, and that's pure creativity. So there's a lot of intuition that's needed there. It's like there's a lot of science here, but there's so much creativity here, because once you feel like, okay, I don't know why I'm going to put this on, it sounds really weird, but you would be surprised later when it actually starts to create the synchronicity. Facilitators need to work with like accidents. You need to have spontaneous accidents that you maybe didn't mean to do that, but you keep trusting, okay, that's meant to be. So, but then when you develop that kind of listening, it becomes easier. When I say easier, you're not having to be intuitive, constantly trying to look for signs. Your body just knows what to do. Like literally, you would just walk to where you're holding the vibration, and you change it, and you're not thinking, and probably a lot of you are there already, but it does help to get a lot more inputs, so it's mapping things out more. The second was the demo. Okay, why do we do the demo in the first place? For me, I do the demo because I'd like to speak to the whole room through just one. I'd like to make the whole room just one room. And usually when people walk in, it's not yet a one room. So when people are looking at a one body, I would like them to look at the body as if they were looking at themselves. And when that happens, there's a huge mirroring. So sometimes when someone goes really deep, because often you would like them to share, and what they end up sharing would influence the whole group, and that's partly why I do it. I'd like the person in the middle to chat. I'm not saying this. I'm just creating the opportunity where this could happen. I would like the person to channel a theme or something integration based that could be based on what I spoke when I opened, and then I do a demo, and then they would go through that. Maybe I talked about the planet, the mother, the universe. I talked about trust. I talked about family. I don't know what I'm going to talk about in each. In trainings, there's always a specific topic because that's what we're studying. And then when I do a demo, they would channel that which was said. But what it would do is it would make non-linear what was linear, right? I created like a storyline. I set up a narrative. And when they lay down, they're going to interpret that in an unexpected way. And then the group would often like feel it. They would actually feel like I'm working on them or the energy is working on them, even though they're looking at the other person. And those who weren't so open, something would like get touched or would feel met. It's very nonlinear. It's just another way of continuing the speaking in a way that's not using words. They're still absorbing the information, but they're not using their Wernicke's area, which is a language comprehension. They would use their amygdala, their basal ganglia. They would use their septal area. They're not thinking so much anymore. They're absorbing. They're still in the conversation in a much deeper way. But really, the more grounded, concrete reason why we are conducting the demo is this. It's still a brain or nervous system explanation. It still has something to do with the autonomic nervous system. We're still training people how to use their autonomic nervous system. So I would do the demo in such a way as I would look around the room after I had done the talk, and I would maybe look at someone, and then I would like I would invite that someone. And when I choose, I normally have parameters in my mind. It would be someone who looks open but looks scared. Looks anxious. Why? It means that they will be in their sympathetic nervous system. And if your sympathetic nervous system is activated, it's not just fear, it's also excitement. And that's when a change is going to happen. And I would also need to intuit, is this someone I can relax? Is this someone trusting enough? Because if you see someone anxious and afraid, but you see they're not trusting, most likely if you put them in the middle of the room, they will not be able to go there. You need someone open, yet someone dynamic. You can relax them, they're trusting, they trust you, but they're also scared. And then the moment they lay down, they will trust more. They will be forced to trust, but they're scared. Yes, so they will be sending out cortisol, epinephrine, dopamine, and then you'll be sending out acetylcholine, serotonin. What's relaxing them? GABA. So the art or the technique in the demo is there needs to be like a switch. There has to be a switch. And the switch isn't like one to the other. It's actually the one and the other becoming one. What you're studying or observing in the body is as they're relaxing and slowing down, you're building up. You need to be aware of both energies. I mean, this is in all the work anyway. You're working on a one-on-one, you're working with a group, you're aware of, okay, something needs to go down, and as it's slowly going down, something's going up. And in the going down and the going up, it would meet. Like there would be a point where there's enough depressant and stimulant energy intermixing. There's enough surrender and there's enough excitement. So the demo is maybe the most powerful instance where you can do that even more than in the session, because there's more surrender and there's more anxiety when you put someone in the middle. They have no chance but to surrender, but they're so scared. So you demonstrate that to people, that it's possible to surrender while being afraid, which is for me the most vulnerable and authentic way a human being could be. Okay, hope this helps. All right, Ingvild.
Hey, thank you so much for all of this. I'm still processing a lot, but there's like a gazillion questions, and I'm gonna try to formulate one or two. So with all the brain chemistry, what pops up in my mind is that at the moment I'm in Holland, and the past few weeks, regularly people message me on social media who have been doing like the activation, been receiving, let's call it receiving the activation work from, other people, and who kind of got lost, or they did like a 3, 4, 5 day training and they have to stop working because they don't know how to manage their energy and their emotions anymore, as well as some of the bigger facilitators here in the Netherlands who are kind of, their bodies are completely deregulated. It's really becoming a thing. So I've always been researching and putting a lot of knowledge together to, make people also think for themselves and don't just go into more, because then the narrative also in the online space starts to become like, yeah, but that's like the awakening. My soul wants more pain, wants more of this, wants to take me out of work. And I feel it's becoming a very toxic narrative where people are just lost in a loop of almost like thinking, I need more detoxification, and what's left at the end? There's nothing left. There's just a broken body. But then I'm wondering what maybe that's just my mind and it will regulate itself out again, but my heart breaks and it makes me sad, because it's just sad to see people get broken of the work that can be so super healing and empowering, right? So I'm kind of really looking for, or searching for, how, in what way can we add extra space other than just me constantly free coaching people to find their minds back. What can we do as a community or as a way to communicate outwards, or how can we kind of bring this across? Because I feel like I'm also from a cat background, and I now have the sadness of how much I've hold myself down to just fit into the surrender. That's not who I am. I can do that, but I know a lot of people are just stuck in the toxicity of that. I don't know if this makes sense what I'm saying, or am I rambling?
So I was in the Netherlands last year. We really choose carefully where we would go, because where we would go, things tend to blow up, like meaning people would come and it would be intense. I remember when we don't advertise when we travel, when we do trainings, and when we put out very gently that we were going to the Netherlands, the thing that we held was in Rotterdam. It took a day.
Right?
It was a day, and it got filled up, and then there was a waiting list the day after already. So I already knew what to expect. Like let's map out Holland or the Netherlands. We're looking at one of the most liberated cultures in the whole world when it comes to in training oneself to what we ingest, like in terms of drugs or medicine or whatever people want to call it. So brains are doped. They're psychedelic already to begin with. So there's a huge stretch, but I think there's something quite tight there in terms of especially the economic space. And for me, my main issue with the Netherlands is the speed in which it got economized or became an industry. Still the same narrative. The things people aren't talking about, honestly, is when they do go to trainings, they do want to undergo the awakening, but they also want to create a business model out of it because life is hard. You can't avoid that part of like Germany and the Netherlands. So when it got modeled really early with people that, you can save yourself, you can help others, but you can also make this your work. It hit there. Life is hard. So this for me was the narrative that I was hearing from the first no, the ones who are the big facilitators now started those movements that you're not needing to name. The letters, okay? I listened to their narratives as to why they were in a hurry. They took the CAP training, they learned under me, and then they were like bouncing around the walls because it would hit you. So I observed it and I saw the loops. I saw the loops very, very quickly where like it's this is not like a at all like an overnight conversation. It has something to do with time and space, something that happens in people's minds when the energy hits them chemically, electrically, is we would eradicate time. We would go into space. We would become spacey, and the spiritual speak, the language that people use are substantial words to just create repetitions again and again. But because of the hard life is hard, like underneath all that, there's a lot that people aren't speaking in social media that's to do with the brokenness. But because they're like still wanting to hold on. What I've been trying to do anyway, what I've been trying to do is to look for a way to shift the yellow to the indigo. It's really those two colors in Holland. It's a lot of yellow, but the indigo doesn't open up like insight, questions, knowledge, wisdom, because that's what power does. Power would actually make the mind stop working. So what I was hearing in that part of the world, uh the Benelux area, was that people were using the energy as an argumentation or like it's a placeholder. It just takes something that's so big, that space, and then it holds it in place just to simplify. Because minds there weren't actually operating so much. Minds operate there, but more in a way of like function. Like you need to survive, you need to systematize, and it lacks like a slowness because of the climate, because of the economy. It's very, very competitive. It has a very colonizing and competitive spirit. So I do believe that love will find a way. So I'm trusting the emotional aspect is doing something. People don't have that. They're yearning. And so I don't have any other choice with the Netherlands space, and I'm glad we're in conversation with you, but just to wait. I'm waiting it out after my last trip there. What you probably don't know this, but my first book, which is Conscious Trance, it was republished only in another outside of Manila. It was only republished in the Netherlands. It actually got republished there like 10 or 12 years ago, but it got sent to other parts of Europe. It didn't actually stay there. So inner dance has been there a really long time. And the main inner dance person, her name is Maya. She's Indonesian, Dutch. She's just there, like scratching her head, just looking at all of it because she was there in the beginning. Like she was there holding the roots. And then when she saw this whole Kundalini excitement rise, now life force energy, something, she also didn't know what to do. She was just looking at it. It's like an addiction. It's definitely an addiction. It's definitely like related to the conversation around time, like people going into speed and not knowing what to do with it once you speed that up.
People don't digest. It's like the digestion is just
Yeah,
chunk in
yeah,
and
yeah.
then
Yeah,
and then vomit it out and sell it to people. Like it's not digested. It's just
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. It's a bunch of nothing. I did a talk then in Amsterdam when we were passing through, and there's so much curiosity. There's so much like hunger for knowledge, but what I was seeing in the body was like feedbacks tend to go really, really fast, and oversimplifications, generalizations is where people are at. There's like a loop. And so it's not just there. What you're speaking is speaking for a lot of places in the world. It's been yearning for something. And I've decided some time ago not to take a stance where this is necessarily a problem because I empathize with it. I've been through some of this and I had to go through some of the extremes in order to go down, to lower myself, to slow. So I am at least hopeful that we are in this together, that there are people in the world that's holding ground, that's actually wanting to understand, and it's not just experience seeking. My one practical advice would be that there are probably people who are, there's probably a lot of them, but it's not really commonly held. And I don't think we can speak to those few if we're not yet ready. Like we need to embody a lot of the knowledge first as well, to ground it, to make it part of us, to get the wide feedback that's structural. The word is structural. But there are a lot of people who are looking for structure, who are asking questions. And then when they know where to find it, they will go there. But if it isn't being held yet, because it's not ready and still being worked out, we need to wait. So if you will be one of them, and in the Netherlands, I probably work with 3 people, and 2 of them are half Dutch and half something else. I'm talking half African, half Asian, and I tend to listen to them a lot because they have something to say that's a different color than just the white. I would love for something to happen there. So thank you for bringing this up. It's tough in my body as well because it was one of the places in the world faster than Spain. It's like we could do this. Boom.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Kasia, you wanted to speak again. And then I think Becca
Yes,
raised
yes.
her hand. Yeah.
I have, I think, 3 more questions because I'm also very interested what Ingrid said. It was very interesting. In Poland, I don't see something like that, but I was doing 2 sessions, yes, and I have a question about this bad feeling. When someone will come to me and said that he is feeling really, really bad, just like my fiance, for example, yeah. What I can do for them? I should tell them you just need to wait. This will be a process, or should I put some another playlist that is maybe healing or something? Maybe you can recommend me some
Okay.
playlist.
Let's stay with that first. Okay. What we have learned more and more in the inner dance process, especially in the last years, is when let's not call it bad because it's so general. Let's say uncomfortable. There's discomfort there. In the beginning, I'm sure, like me and a lot of people, we wanna fix it because we're problem fixers. Um, we're not doing that anymore. That's not what we're doing. I mean, it's one of the worst fears of facilitators that when the discomfort happens, like I'm not doing a good job, like I'm doing a bad job. But weird as it might sound, like in Maya especially, when like it could be a pain It could be a depression, a sadness, or like some scary thing comes up. We need to come from like an attitude of okay, this is good. Okay, okay, it's good. We have something to work on. This is great. And when you have that attitude, because normally like when you go into a people pleasing, empathic, like, oh no, like poor you, I'm gonna love you, I'm gonna try to help you. It like people with a background in psychology, psychiatry, psychoanalysis, or just like therapy, we know that what that might do, it would actually just create this like a repetition, a loop. We would feed that, and then it would just keep the trauma going. So some of the playlists that we have been constructing over the years are actually able to bring out some of the discomfort. A lot of it actually started as early as the womb room, when all I did was take sounds from the womb. Then I put certain frequencies around that. I didn't think it would be so massively important for a lot of people. It terrified like so many people in the beginning, like, advanced inner dance practitioners. But when they got used to it, it's like they can't handle normal music anymore. They actually learn to go that deep. So this is what I mean about introduction, acclimatization, stability. That for some people who are experiencing discomfort and pain, they need to be able to sit with it. And like in Maya, like we use synthesizers, so we can act because we're using it live, using analog electronic uh instruments that mirror brain. Okay, synthesizers are voltage gated instruments that utilize electricity, and this is exactly what the brain does. So some of the playlists that we share, they're using electricity that's voltage gated because the synapses, the neurons are voltage gated. You can either create an action potential, or you can inhibit an action potential, and synthesizers can do that. Certain sounds can do that. Certain touch mechanisms can do that. When there's like a discomfort, um, let me give an example. Like there was a woman here from Belgium. Her name was oh my God, I've been having these memory blanks. Help me out. Does anyone? Yeah, Christelle. Thank you. Christelle was in Maya, and basically she had a big accident 30 years ago. It was with a car. It was actually a series of accidents where she broke her brain, and neurologists, special doctors couldn't do anything about it. So when she went to Maya, she came with her broken brain, and she had all these symptoms, like certain things she couldn't do with her body. She couldn't do this. She couldn't contralateralize like these movements together. She had a hard time sleeping. She had a hard time with language. She couldn't speak right. So then when she laid down in some of the more intense playlists that we were creating live, what happened was there was a lot of pain, and she was screaming. She was like, it's so uncomfortable. But there was something in her that was really enjoying it, but she wasn't expressing that. We could tell that what was important was something was happening. It was so painful for her. Like, and then what was great was she could give feedback. She would say in the group, wow, that was hell. That was so painful. But it was the high frequencies that was doing it. So I had a choice when I would do the next session. Do I give the high frequencies, or do I give her the low frequencies, which would balance it out? I would actually make it even higher. And then it would get to a point where, oh, it's not hurting anymore. Now the low frequencies are hurting. The lower frequencies are hurting. I can't stand it. So you know what I would do? I would make it even lower. So I would then mix up super high, super low frequencies until such point that it wasn't painful anymore. And all of these symptoms, like sleep, like apnea and sleep, where she was snoring so loud it went away. Suddenly her hands were doing this in the inner dance. She went home to Belgium. People couldn't recognize her. They were like, what? Just the way she's speaking, she can put the words together now in like a sequence that she couldn't do because maybe there was something wrong with her Broca's area. So that's when we learned how to get people to sit with it. Like it really broke the I will heal you mechanism in our bodies. We learn to use pain. Pain is a good friend. Discomfort is a good friend. So I think, sometimes when you're sitting down with a person, it could be in a cafe and then they start to talk about their problems. There are people who would like to fix those problems. A lot of you come from these cultures where we have empathy and we hate it when someone's feeling bad. So we would like them to feel better. But for those who are authentically there, sitting with like a like an emotion, for some people, the last thing they want is for someone to fix their problem. Even they don't want to fix their problem; they just want to be with it. They want to authentically process and see what is there. This is the work that we're doing. We want to see what is there because usually cognitive dissonance is an explanation in psychology as to the human inability to stay with a discomfort. What we try to do is we lie, we hide, we modify something so that we wouldn't see it, that the problem is there. And people are walking around these cities with a lot of these hidden elements, like a usual example would be you're smoking and you know that it's bad for you. It's doing something to your lungs. So either you're like, okay, I'm gonna hide that, or I'll exercise so that I don't feel so bad that I'm smoking. You try to mediate the thing that you are uncomfortable with. So the process that we are holding is meant to unravel or like dig out the discomfort so that we can look at it. And the moment it's authentically looked at is actually the moment it doesn't feel bad. It just becomes an energy. So a lot of people, they come to the work and then they be coming with a lot of pain, and then the pain disappears. But and then they would say the pain disappeared, but I tell them actually it's still there. Try to feel it. They say, it feels like an energy. It's still there because I'm seeing it another way. I'm experiencing it a different way. It's still there, but it's a different perception. I'm not avoiding it anymore. I'm not resisting it anymore. So everything that we're learning is about like how to allow the resistance to flow, to get that thing that got stuck somewhere, to let it move. And when it moves, it's still there. It's just not being experienced in the same way. It's gotten dislodged. But the process of allowing it to move is painful for a lot of people because they're holding on. And when that mestasizes and calcifies in the body, it becomes real, it becomes physical anyway. And on the way to energy, you're gonna feel something. So you need we need a thicker skin. We need to be almost like the fool, the joker, your mother Kali, your Shakti. You're holding a sword, you're holding like a flower, you're loving, but you're also allowing death to take place. And sometimes the best healers are the gentle ones, but they can cut. So you need to nurture both the Shakti and the Kali part of you. What was your other question?
Yeah, thank you. Great explanation. It's really powerful. Um, you already said to me two good playlists for Polish people, and it was really a very good playlist. The first one I played, it was long time. People was a little bit shocked because they didn't know what to expect. So it was like, oh, I don't know what to say, but everybody say something a lot. They was quite interested, so they came second time. And the second time playlist was called 12 Stages, and this was amazing. Everybody was like, wow. They was like, it was a lot of love and light inside of the room. So I'm glad this is very beautiful playlist. And I want to ask you about playlist because I already was asking about Flower of Light. I love this playlist. But what which another playlist you can recommend to me from this 7 states?
Okay, great. That's a really good
Yeah.
question. Okay.
Mhm.
Kasi later, could you write your WhatsApp number down in the chat? I'd like Anahata to read it. Anahata is from Poland, and she's trying to organize. She's been with the inner dance community for a long time. So she
Mhm.
would love to be in
Okay.
conversation with you, I'm sure. Okay, Poland, for me, tends to be one of the most emotional bodies I've ever seen. And when I say emotional, I'm talking about like religious and family structures. And there's a lot of pain there. There's a lot of masculine, feminine disharmony. There's sometimes a difficulty to enter into trust spaces. That's why inner dance tends to go quite big, and the modalities that came after inner dance. So like 7 states would be the next way to go, because okay, long time works because it mirrors the old inner dance playlist systems, which is to say a lot of the sequential slow to fast different emotions are embedded there. Like literally the old songs are in long time that you wouldn't find anymore in the new playlists, the classic inner dance music. So that's great as an opening, and then bringing it to 12 stages is somewhere like in between. That's still quite classic. And then Flower of Time is already not classic, meaning it will help the Polish energy to use the 7 stages playlist. Like everything in the 7 stages you should use, because it activates also the non-emotional part. It hides a lot of prefrontal cortex, thinking, science, objectivity, like seeing, not just feeling. So it would, in the long term, help the Polish energy to develop like high intelligence levels, not just emotional mechanisms. Until such time that you would, okay, my advice right now for most facilitators everywhere is all of the normal playlists from 7 states to, yeah, the classic playlists in those folders, they're quite triggering in all the different varieties possible. But what I would do is probably like a alternate between those intense playlists, and then I would shift to like a sleep playlist. I would experiment with those. Those sleep playlists aren't just for sleeping, they're actually for inner dance. So try to consider synchronic. Synchronic is in the synthesis folder, and if you don't have it, just ask your local trainer for it. Synchronic would be my favorite, non-personal. Okay, like not giving them words, not giving them songs, but totally created in the studio. You could try that out for yourself and then see what you think. And then either like alternate that or the sleep playlist, and then go back to the more emotional ones, you know. So then they get access to the personal, and then when you move to the impersonal, they have access to the cosmic because of the extremes, and then they learn to keep traveling back and forth, the personal, the planetary, personal, cosmic, personal, you know.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So cosmic will be synchronic, for example, yeah? And
Cosmic
7 states.
Cosmic would be more the sleep playlists, because if they're coming from the normal playlist, the intense, and then they move to the something like rest and digest or remember. My problem with remember is the white noise in the beginning is too long for some of the versions. So either you're DJing that, or just start with the rest and digest that had been adjusted by Caro's husband. You just learn to alternate. So yeah, the C playlist would be more cosmic. The synchronic would, I would say, be planetary. No, planetary would be the noise app. If you're using just purely the noise app, that would be the planet. And we'll talk about that next week.
Okay, great. And I have also one question from one girl, because she was on the session and she wanted me to ask you about water in her ears after session. It's normal. She
Yeah.
said, can you ask if
Yeah.
what was that?
I've
Because
heard that.
she was having a lot of water in
Yeah. I hear that from like Russians, like people from the Nordics. It tends to happen. I don't know why, but I've heard that. So trust it.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
wonderful. So I don't see any raised hands, but we'll give a chance for anyone who wants to put one last or two last things out, and then we will close. We're past 3 hours. If not, then I think this is quite a big week. I would suggest it for those who was not on the first call this week. I would love for you to watch that if you can find the time. There are a lot of things there that we didn't bring up that are hugely important, especially in regards to oxytocin, vasopressin. We talked about the SA node. We talked about the basal ganglia. There were better explanations there. Today, I would say it's super important for those who were on the first call. So it was just the same. Try to watch both, and there's a lot of complexity in both, and it needs some, repetitions there. You'd be surprised that there would be a lot more that jumps up the second or third time you watch. So these are things you can do all the way up till the next years. But for now, as I said, like thank you so much. I'm going to let you know the amount of preparation that I put into construct these calls aren't days, they're weeks. We had that long month break, and I've been like processing these, and it's not easy to put them together because they're just so nonlinear. There's a lot that I'm not able to even speak to you because there's not the space that's in my notes, but most of the important ones in general are there. We can have review classes later where we can repeat these, and maybe some of those might come up if there's some things that need clarification. So thank you so much for allowing this to happen. I'm really enjoying this. So yeah, help me to close if you could unmute and just say goodbye, good night.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you later.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.